Coming from the outstanding year of 2009, we have the GTS 250 from NVIDIA. It is an ancient graphics card, coming from a time when DirectX 10 was king, and unfortunately doesn't support DirectX 11 nor 12, so unfortunately we are quite limited in the amount of games you can play. There are always workarounds for certain games, but I'm just playing, well, they're just games you can pretty much run right away, right out of the box, I guess you could say. We got 4 popular titles. They're games people play, they're games that are fun, they're games that I personally enjoy, and that's what we're going to be seeing on the screen today. It is a bit of a shorter video today, but you know what, we got a bit of a limitation when it comes to games that we can play. There are always older games. You want to play Team Fortress on it, you'll have no problem at all. But if you're looking for something more recent, something pretty popular, well, that's what we got today. Anyways, moving on to a breakdown of our system specs. We have our 2700X at stock, we have a Gigabyte gaming K7 for our motherboard, our GPU, of course, is the GTS 250, and we have 16 gigs of RAM at a nice 3000 megahertz. Starting off with Valorant. We're doing 4 games, that's how we're testing it out, that's how we're getting our numbers. We're doing 2 games at a beautiful resolution of 1080p, and then a bit of a worse resolution, but still a good one, still a good one. A lot of people play at 720p. You know, maybe you're an old console guy. I just play a lot of 720p. So yeah, we're gonna do 2 games at 720p as well. Alright, enough of this, let's actually check it out. How does it game at 1080p? Well, it's not bad at all. Gameplay you're seeing here was recorded at 1080p, and also just a quick thing, because I don't think I added it earlier in the video, everything that you're seeing is being done externally. Nothing is being recorded on the actual computer, it's all being captured externally, so there is no performance loss. What you're seeing right here at 1080p is what you would expect, as long as you have a CPU that can actually keep up with the GTS 250. If you gotta use a GTS 250 as a backup and play Valorant, you very much could. In fact, drop that down to 720p, go inside an indoor area, and look at that. Look at that frame rate right there. You got a 240Hz monitor, which I doubt this thing supports. It might though, I don't know, I didn't check it personally. Could. And you know what? You could play Valorant 240Hz monitor or GTS 250, just stay indoors. There you go. Yeah, overall, I mean, Valorant's a very easy game to run. I'm gonna include it in most videos because a lot of people play it. And it's that great, it's that one game where if you have a bad, not to say bad, but a weak rig, you can play it. Alright, moving on to our second game today. A very, very fun game. At least personally, that's what I believe. We have Risk of Rain. How are we testing it out? Well, we're going to be doing 30 minutes at these settings right here, starting it off from the moment the drop pod drops down, all the way to 30 minutes later, so basically half an hour later. This is what we're getting. These are our results. And here's the footage as well, just showing you off a bit of an earlier part of the game. And there you go. It runs fairly decent. Risk of Rain, can GTS 250 handle it? Yes. Do you gotta run it at very low settings at 720p? Yes, unfortunately you would do. What do we expect from a card that is over a decade old at this point? And it was a rebranded card. So it's even older in some ways if you think about it. It's an old card. Anyways, GTA 5. It's an older game. Unfortunately, you do have to run it at a pretty low resolution. Now, I'm going to show you off a bike ride around the beach, give you a bit of an idea of how it is in game, and also I'll give you the ending of the benchmark in game as a comparison. So yeah, here we go, 800 by 600. Fortunately, we have to drop below 720p, but you know what? Hard times like these call for extreme measures, and if we gotta go below 720p to enjoy a game, we gotta. You could mess around with the settings a bit more, you could always overclock the card a bit more. You're probably not gonna get much more performance out of it, but hey, it is what it is. At least the game's playable. And at the end of the day, that's what's important. If you have to drop down to 2 pixels eventually, you gotta do what you gotta do. Can you play at 2 pixels? I don't know, maybe. Nothing's impossible. Probably. I'd say so. Anyways, like I said earlier, for the comparison, here's the end of the benchmark. And as you're gonna see here, it starts off pretty smooth, especially when you're dropping in here. It's over 60 almost the entire time. Eventually, we'll see a little bit later, it's going to start dropping down below. So even though everything's at 800 by 600 and you got everything at low, unfortunately it's not going to be able to cut it above 60 the whole time. Thankfully, if you go on YouTube, there's plenty of videos showing you how you could drop the settings even more and improve the performance. And if you're an overclocker, you feel comfortable, you could always get a bit of performance. But again, card's old. It's an old card, unfortunately. It's a mid-range card, an old mid-range card. That makes it even worse in some cases. It's not the top-end dog from a decade ago. No, no, no. It's the mid-range. Alright. Anyways, wow, I've been talking about this card for a while now. Let's go ahead and move on to our last game. How about that? How about we just do a very classic game? So many people played it. It's Counter-Strike. In this case, Global Offensive. Alright? Yeah, we're not playing Source on it. We're doing Global Offensive. Which came out around the same time. I'm pretty sure this card came out. So actually, this isn't that crazy. Though it has been updated quite a bit. Anyways, I'm just going to be showing you a brief match. And I'll show you the in-game benchmark. Unfortunately, I had a bit of an issue with MSI Afterburner. The first time I actually benchmarked the game, I had no problems, though I did this footage about a week or so later after doing the benchmarks. So unfortunately, MSI gave me a bit of trouble and I couldn't actually get it hooked. Tried adding it into Revia Tuner, tried setting it to high priority, still had a bunch of issues, tried reinstalling it, still had issues, so at least it worked the first time, so here you go. At least in the bottom right, as you can see, you'll be able to see the frame rate. And overall in the casual match, it wasn't bad at all. It's pretty playable, and again, this is at 720p at the lowest settings possible. And to finalize CSGO, we have the benchmark, which I actually could do at MSI. I'm happy. I like when things work. That's great. I do a lot of troubleshooting, but it's always nice when things just work. It's always just so great. It's like, wow, that's awesome. And sometimes you figure it out, and you're like, wow, I feel great now. But sometimes you don't. And that's the worst thing in the world. But you move on. That's right. Alright. Let's go on and let's end this. Let's just stop dealing with DirectX 10 cards for today. Until I move on to the next DirectX 10 card, which probably will be shortly. So our conclusion, how does it work? Well, of course it's not that great in 2020. Unfortunately, it's a DirectX 10 card. It doesn't support 11 or 12, so you have that big limitation right there. In terms of being able to play a few games that are so popular, you can always do it. And of course, there's plenty of older titles that are still very popular. Team Fortress 2 being a big one that I still play to this day. Probably the game that I play most nowadays that could easily run on this card. So yeah, older games, you could do it. In terms of newer games, the options will become more and more limited. And who knows, maybe they'll release a second Valorant in 5 years that also runs on potatoes. That'd be nice. Well, yeah, that's how it is. What do I think in the card? It's okay. It's not that great. You can't do a lot of stuff. But if your 2080 Ti dies, you could use it for a few days, You could do it. Alright, peace out.